I was one of the Native American children, adopted at birth and removed from our country's Indian reservation system. I was raised in a small middle-class farming community, but was never told of my true American Indian heritage. It was still taboo back in those early days. The years passed, and in 1987 I lost both parents. While going through their personal belongings, my wife discovered my adoption papers and she began a search. 5 years later, I was reunited with my biological Lakota family, living on the lower Brule Sioux Indian Reservation of South Dakota. I am a son of two mothers and a product of two worlds that had collided, but I have an equal amount of love and pride for both. I'm Paul LaRouche, and the stories you are about to see are an attempt to share this true American story of a hidden heritage. In 2007, our group Brule planned what was to be our largest, most difficult, and most controversial concert of our 30-year journey. It would become our flagship endeavor and reach a worldwide audience. Our journey to Mount Rushmore and the Brule Concert for Reconciliation of the Cultures was documented as follows.
The Black Hills of South Dakota, Pahasapa, an area rich in history and beauty, an island of trees in a sea of grass, held sacred by many Native American tribes, and the site of a unique concert with one main theme, reconciliation. A concept not often seen in the world of music, but to Paul LaRouche, the word carries heavy meaning and is the basis for his music and the inspiration for his band's performances at Mount Rushmore National Park in the heart of the Black Hills.
Well, my desire for reconciliation has been, at the top of my personal mission for years, really from the very start of the Brule story. And the reason being that as a product of two worlds, especially two cultures that have been at odds with one another over the years, when you become a product of both of the worlds, you find that I guess there's one of three things you can do. You can choose side one, you can choose side two, or the third option is to try to embrace both sides. And in my case, it was a desire to bring these two cultures that I've been part of, Native America and mainstream America, a little bit closer together. They're both my family. I have a love for both sides. And, really in kind of like a childlike effort, I just wanted to share the two worlds with each other and bring them closer together. But I found shortly into the journey that before you could really do that, you had to apply forgiveness on both sides. And when forgiveness happens, healing takes place, and once that happens, the world of possibilities is infinite.
This goal is ultimately being accomplished through music. Brule and the American Indian rock opera have been performing their unique style of music for well over a decade, while sharing their culture and this goal of reconciliation, as well as building a diverse group of musicians, dancers, crew, and fans. In a sense, pioneering one of the last musical frontiers. While the band carries a rich history, the culture they represent carries an even richer one. The link between Native people and the Black Hills is strong. For Paul, it was an easy choice as to where he would hold his concert for unity.
Well, from the very beginning, I felt it important to find a location of great significance for this idea that we had, this concert for the reconciliation of the cultures. At the very beginning of the Brule journey, it hadn't crystallized yet, but it wasn't too long after our return to South Dakota and after Brule began to perform around the Midwest that I realized that the Black Hills carried a special meaning. Now, our interest in Mount Rushmore became even more apparent as time went on. I felt that it was important to find a location that represented something historically to the Lakota people. The place where you could come for healing, the place where you could come for forgiveness, In my mind, and I guess this is just me, I've held this position all along, and not everyone would agree with me, but I feel like the best place to go for a gesture of forgiveness is right to the heart of where the problems have been over the past. And so the Black Hills became an obvious choice.
For one, to completely appreciate the significance of holding this concert at Mount Rushmore in the Black Hills, we must look at the history of the hills and the people who live there. The Black Hills are a small, isolated mountain range rising up from the Great Plains of North America in western South Dakota and extending into Wyoming. The region is something of a geological anomaly. Volcanic activity and periods of uplift created as the Earth's plates moved into each other combined over billions of years to create the hills and shape its signature Harney Peak granite. The Black Hills encompass the Black Hills National Forest, Custer State Park, and are home to the tallest peaks of continental North America east of the Rockies. The Lakota call the Black Hills Paha Sapa, meaning the hills that are black. This name derives from the trees found in the hills, including the ponderosa pine and the Black Hill spruce, which make the hills appear black from a distance. Native American tribes have inhabited the hills for thousands of years and consider them to be sacred, including the Arikara, Cheyenne, Crow, Kiowa, Pawnee, and Lakota tribes.
The Black Hills, from my humble viewpoint, are spiritual to almost every tribe. You can't say every, but a lot of tribes are, because of the significance of the Black Hills and how the Dakota and Nakota people shared them with other neighboring tribes because of their relevance and spiritual center, basically, like Nawa Woods. Among the Seminole people, we have stories about journeying up here and visiting and just respecting their spiritual sites as they would do to ours. And then when we come and visit, to learn what we can from them and take it back to our people to show that there is no difference between the two other than your language. It's the same. And I'm glad to be a guest here in the Black Hills. And beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Well, the Black Hills to the Indian people or the Lakota people are very sacred. They're a spiritual place. And I think all of the Native Americans around feel the loss because we can't use the Black Hills like we used to. And there's a lot of legends that go with this area out here.
You know, it's amazing. And what's amazing about it is this is such a sacred place, a sacred land for many different tribes. And just to come up here as an individual, as a visiting native, is great to see the beauty of this land and to know how sacred it is for many different tribes that I'm not of or from. But from the outside looking in, I can understand where both parties are coming from. And I understand both sides. That's all I can really say about it. There's nothing I can really say negative about it. And I know the Black Hills are very important among the Cheyenne, among the Lakotas, among the Sioux people. And I find that really awesome.
The Black Hills are a very special, sacred place to the Lakota people and also the Dakota and all the tribal affiliations around the Black Hills. Even in my tribal nation, the Ojibwe, and because of the journeys of each tribal band dealing with the Black Hills in that area, they hold those mountains very sacred and in high regards. And this has a lot to do with history, being that they say that the Black Hills is one of the central locations for all of Turtle Island, being that when things were happening early in history, the eastern coast states were taken by the colonies, and then when Manifest Destiny started happening out west, the plains were kind of left alone and very desolate, and so they were kind of one of the last frontiers left of the native culture. And also, you can also see that in a lot of the songs and dances, the very primal, very raw richness of the culture that is still very closely related to years and histories past.
What do the Black Hills mean to your people? What is its significance?
This is our home. This is our home. It's always been, always will be. And we have never lost it. We still own it. And it's going to be that way for years to come yet. And that's the reason I like this place. A lot of them always say, if the Indians took back to Black Hills, chase the whites out, that's not so. Everybody is settled. Everybody's here to stay. We're not chasing anybody out.
To me, the Black Hills represents a lot. It's a powerful symbol for all nations to come together. And the Black Hills to the Lakota is where the prayers go. And so to me, the way I was brought up by my parents and stuff, to my understanding, that's kind of the thought process that I look at.
And being Oglala, Lakota, these lands are sacred. We consider them sacred, to our tribe. And my family is descendants of Red Cloud. And so we hold that really proud. We're really proud of that.
To me, it is a sacred place. All the details and all the understandings aside, it's more about just being there and standing there and knowing that there's something there. And I mean, I think that anything that has any piece of land that has that sacred power to it, there is always going to be conflict that comes upon it. Anything really good, there is always really bad, So I think that with the Black Hills, it's in a sense, like to me, it's destiny to have its conflict, therefore, because it is a spiritual place, and therefore it will always have that battle, spiritual battle constantly going on with it. So to me, it is a very sacred place. And, I think a lot of people see that. I think a lot of people understand that. And yet there is just the course of things that will be, that happen, and people fight over it. And, but it is what it is,
As the influx of white settlers increased in the West, the United States government made their first treaty signing with the tribes of the Plains. Called the First Treaty of Fort Laramie, it was signed on September 17, 1851. The treaty promised control of the Great Plains to the tribes, the bulk of Native American territory, which included the Black Hills for as long as the river flows and the eagle flies. The treaty was signed by the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Crow, Shoshone, Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara, and Lakota nations. The tribes guaranteed safe passage for settlers traveling on the Oregon Trail in return for the promise of annuities. The tribes also allowed roads and forts to be built in their territories. This treaty ushered in a short time of peace in the Plains. Several tribes never received the annuities promised. In 1863, the discovery of gold in Montana created an incentive for white settlers to find an easy route to reach the gold fields. The fastest route was the Bozeman Trail, starting from Fort Laramie in Wyoming and ending in Virginia City, Montana. The trail passed through the Powder River hunting grounds of the Lakota as given to them in the 1851 treaty. In late spring 1866, a council between the Lakota and the U.S. government was called at Laramie to discuss a treaty to obtain a right-of-way through the Powder River country and the establishment of military posts to protect the road. The meeting did not go well. While the conference was in session, the 18th U.S. Infantry arrived at Laramie. They had orders to establish forts in the Powder River country. Red Cloud, a prominent leader of the Oglala Lakota who was present at the council, was outraged that the army was bringing in troops before the Lakota had agreed to a road through the area. Red Cloud and his followers left the council, promising resistance to any whites who sought to use the trail or occupy the Powder River country. From 1866 to 1868, Red Cloud successfully implemented a campaign against the troops attempting to build forts in the Powder River country. By 1868, the government had decided that use of the railroad and another less traveled trail to Montana were better alternatives than trying to maintain an expensive and unproductive military presence in the area. All forts in the area were abandoned at the request of Red Cloud, and negotiations of the Second Fort Laramie Treaty began. Red Cloud became the only Native leader to win a major war against the United States. The Second Treaty of Fort Laramie, signed in 1868, guaranteed to the Lakota ownership of the Black Hills and further land and hunting rights in South Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, and Montana. The Powder River country was to be closed to all whites, thus creating the Great Sioux Reservation and establishing an agency system that the tribes were now required to report to. The treaty also further secured the territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Crow, and Arikara tribes. During this same time, another leader of the Yankton Sioux tribe was making strides for peace with the whites, paving the way for peace, which is the basis for our story. Stripes the Ree, or Struck by the Ree, born in 1804, was instantly recognized as a future leader for the Yankton tribe. According to Yankton legend, the boy was born when the Corps of Discovery, led by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, met with the leaders of the Yankton Sioux to inform them that their land now belonged to the United States. Upon hearing of the newborn child, the expedition asked to see the boy. Lewis wrapped the newborn boy in an American flag, baptizing him as a future great American. As the years passed, the young boy learned the ways of his people and became a great hunter. He became known as Old Strike by his followers. As wars raged west and east of the Yankton settlements, Old Strike managed to keep his people out of the conflicts by promoting peace with the whites. 7 years after the first Fort Laramie Treaty, Old Strike participated in the signing of another treaty with the United States government. In 1858, the Treaty of Washington ceded most of the land the Yankton occupied in exchange for their own reservation, as well as annuities and schools to educate the children. Old Strike was largely responsible for preventing the Yanktons from being involved in the Santee Uprising of 1862 in southwest Minnesota, and even sent his warriors to protect and warn white settlers. The uprising failed, and despite the Yanktons' peaceful stance, they were expelled from Minnesota along with the Santees. 3 years later, Old Strike traveled to Washington to testify at the hearings of the Doolittle Commission against Indian agents who were accused of committing fraud against the tribes. In recognition for his peaceful efforts, he was rewarded with medals from U.S. Presidents Franklin Pierce, Ulysses S. Grant, and James Garfield. Despite his good intentions, there were those among the tribe who resented Old Strike's pushes for peace. He was often harassed and his property violated. Although he may not have wanted to see the old traditions disappear, he recognized the inevitability of change and continued to promote peace and urged his people to adopt the white man's ways and to avoid confrontation. Rumors of gold in the Black Hills had circulated for decades. Pressure to explore the hills had been growing for years among those anxious to get a glimpse at the uncharted territory. This isolation finally ended in July of 1874, when General George Armstrong Custer was ordered to lead a reconnaissance mission to explore the hills. Many white trappers and explorers had claimed over the years to have explored the hills, but most were run off or killed by the surrounding tribes protecting their land. The official reason for Custer's reconnaissance mission was the idea of establishing a fort near the hills to prevent hostile natives from raiding settlements to the south. But it was a cover. The prospect of finding gold and initiating another gold rush to boost the economy was the real mission. Setting out from Fort Abraham Lincoln in North Dakota and lasting a little over a month, the expedition was deemed a success. On August 5, 1874, Custer and his 7th Cavalry discovered gold in French Creek near the present-day town of Custer. An official announcement of the presence of gold was made through newspaper reporters who accompanied the expedition. A detailed survey of the hills was conducted the following year, opening the door for thousands of miners. For a time, the government sent troops to intercept the settlers and turn them back from Indian land. Unable to stop the illegal settlement of whites, the government gave up and began negotiating with the Lakota to purchase the hills. Towns sprung up overnight: Custer City, Hill City, Harney City, and Sheridan in the southern hills, Rapid City, and Rockerville in the central hills, and Deadwood, Lead, Crook City, and Spearfish in the northern hills. The gold rush sparked the Black Hills War between the Lakota and their Cheyenne allies against the United States Army. Angered by the consistent failure of the government to keep intruders out, many Lakota and Cheyenne, led by Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, began to refuse to report to their agencies. Warned to return to their reservations or be considered hostile, the United States Army was quickly approved to round up the bands by force. Culminating in the Battle of Greasy Grass, more commonly known as the Battle of Little Bighorn, General Custer and his 7th Cavalry were handed a decisive defeat. Custer, the man who led the expedition that discovered gold in the hills, lay dead. The Lakota and Cheyenne were eventually defeated in the fall of 1876 and returned to their agencies. The uprising and death of General Custer renewed efforts on Capitol Hill to get the Lakota to cede the Black Hills. By the end of 1876, the headmen of the Lakota reluctantly consented to cede the Black Hills in exchange for continued government rations. However, the government's negotiators failed to obtain the consent of 3/4 of the adult male Sioux affected as required by the 1868 treaty. Nevertheless, the Black Hills were open for legal settlement. The fort, which Custer was apparently scouting a location for during his 1874 campaign, was founded as Fort Meade on the northern edge of the hills. The fort gave birth to the town of Sturgis, while the town of Hot Springs formed in the southern hills. Today, the hills are no longer a mining hotspot. Mining towns like Sheridan, Harney City, and Crook City became ghost towns as the gold began to dwindle away at the turn of the century. While other towns like Deadwood, Lead, Spearfish, and Hill City have survived from tourism, gambling, and the logging industry. The Black Hills are now a tourist destination, its visitors hoping to relive the thrill of the Old West and to gaze at the beauty of the hills. You can ride the 1880 train that follows an old mining railroad from Hill City, spend your hard-earned cash in one of Deadwood's casinos, or watch the trial of Jack McCall for the murder of Wild Bill Hickok. Many of the old mines are now run down and abandoned, but some have been turned into tourist stops like the Homestake Gold Mine in Lead. Sturgis is host to the largest motorcycle rally in the country, attracting more than 550,000 bikers to the hills each year. Mount Rushmore and Crazy Horse Mountain attract millions of visitors each year to view the granite carvings. The Great Sioux Reservation shrunk even more over time, finally being organized into 6 separate reservations. Bear Butte and Wind Cave, sites considered to be holy and sacred to the tribes, similar to Mecca or Mount Sinai, have become state parks. The Lakota have never accepted the validity of the purchase of the hills by the U.S. government, and the area remains under dispute to this day. Groups like Defend Bear Butte and Defenders of the Black Hills often hold rallies and protests to prevent further encroaching on Bear Butte and other sites. In 1980, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that the Black Hills were illegally taken in violation of the 1868 treaty, and that $106 million be paid to the Lakota for purchase of the hills. The Lakota refused the settlement, as they wanted the return of the Black Hills instead. The money remains in an interest-bearing account, which now amounts to over $757 million. The money remains unclaimed. As time has passed, the fading fires of the great chiefs have given way to the new generation of tribal leaders. The allure of quick money for tribal chairmen, council members, and the Lakota people grows with time, but most still maintain that the Black Hills are not for sale. About 15 minutes northwest of the town of Chamberlain in central South Dakota sits the Lower Brule Sioux Tribal Reservation, one of the 6 reservations organized from the Great Sioux Reservation. Out in an area called the Little Bend sits a small house, home of Paul LaRouche, aka Brule, and his family. His music, his band, and the concert at Mount Rushmore are products of his story.
I was one of the Native American children adopted at birth and removed from the reservation system. But as fate would have it, I was raised by two very wonderful parents, and I grew up as part of a small white middle-class farming community in southwest Minnesota.
Surrounded by his loving adoptive family, Paul's talent for music was evident at an early age. Paul knew about his adoption, but his true heritage was kept a secret.
I was born in 1955, and it was very common back in those years. And prior to that, through the 30s and 40s, I understand it was prevalent as well. The information that you were Native American, in many cases, when a child was adopted, was kept secret. And there are many families who buried the information about their Native American heritage and lineage. It wasn't popular back in those days. And in fact, it's really only changed maybe in the last 20 years. And now, of course, many families are eager to proclaim that they have a little Cherokee or whatever it might be in their family tree. Sadly enough, these days now the information has been lost. It's been discarded by past generations. So families have to go forth without being able to really trace down the exact information. But I recall the best of times, and southwest Minnesota was a perfect place to grow up back in the 50s and 60s. Of course, I have the best of memories, and I know that my mom and dad did everything they could to provide a warm, loving home environment, and they did just that. I graduated from high school in 1972, met my beautiful wife the same year, and we went on to raised our family, two children of Minneapolis.
After losing both of his adoptive parents in the same year, Paul's wife Kathy discovered his adoption papers. After allowing several years for the grieving and healing process, a breakthrough came in the year 1993 when Paul discovered his biological Lakota family.
Well, as the story goes, she was able to trace back to the location, find the family, and 2 weeks before Thanksgiving of 1993, I received a phone call out of the blue from a gentleman who introduced himself as my biological brother. At the close of our conversation, his words were, "Come on home. Come on home." And of course, we did just that. We made our first trip to Lower Brule on Thanksgiving of 1993. It seemed like overnight we were welcomed back into the family, the community, and the tribe. And it was a life-changing experience indeed. The rest of the Brule story really begins at that moment when we made that first trip to Lower Brule and began what I call at least the second part of a life.
Paul's homecoming was a happy one as he was reunited with his brother, sister, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, his heritage, and his ancestors. Among them was Strikes the Reed, who spent the balance of his life promoting peace, much like Paul has.
Glad to have you home. Everything's pretty much in the book.
True.
I got to read the book.
It was quite a surprise.
Well, it was a great surprise,
Awesome
yeah.
surprise.
It's awesome to find out you got a brother who's coming home.
Well, because all there was you and Susie left, and now there's you and Susie and Paul. So, quite awesome to have an older brother. For me, it just kind of made sense to all the things that were unanswered, from having to, as a kid, do the projects, the family tree projects, to there being a big full side on one side, to there being like nothing on the other side. And none of us really knew what he was, but it all, to me, like, I think growing up so years and having the, you try and guess, you try and think maybe, and there's just like the things that happen in life, you kind of feel like you might be a part of this, and to me it just kind of made sense. That's kind of always what I figured it would be. So it was just more like life just seemed to make sense at that point, once we kind of found all that and met the family and everything.
You do become something different. You do become a product of not one but two worlds. And you struggle for a while. You struggle for a while to come to odds with, how do I treat this information? What do I do with this information? How do I clean the slate? How do I proceed? Once again, what happened to me was the process was called reconciliation. It had to happen internally. But the information of becoming part of this rich culture was a life-changing experience, and to totally describe it in words I'll never be able to do. But it certainly set into motion inspiration of great magnitude for everything that took place from that first reunion to this day.
Armed with the new knowledge of his heritage, Paul re-entered the world of music in the relatively new genre of contemporary Native American music. Mixing the traditional sounds of Native America with the music he grew up with, rock, pop, jazz, and everywhere in between, Paul cut his first CD, We the People. Brule was born.
Well, the beginning of Brule was a harmless enough event when it first began. And of course, I had spent years in music before this return back to Lower Brule. Actually, the music business had been pretty good to our family, but the real fact is it had become difficult over the years. When we returned to Lower Brule, I would say it was our new family, the LaRouche family in Lower Brule, that realized that as a young person I had been given special opportunity and special privileges. These things, to be part of music, to be given, the opportunity to move forward in music was something that certainly wouldn't have happened back on the reservation. And our family and my biological parents were very poor people. And the times on the reservation back in '55 were very difficult, and certainly the opportunity would have never been there to jump into the world of music. Well, realizing that, they were the first to say, perhaps what this is all about is this is a chance for you to go back into music and a chance to now go out into the world and this time represent not only you as an artist and your family, but now you can represent our community and you can represent our culture.
He's carrying an important message of reconciliation between the two worlds. I remember when they came to visit and we all sat around and we knew about Paul's music before, or his music background, and right off the bat he wanted to incorporate his music with some type of Native American music, powwow music, and we really pushed him along with Kathy and really supported him to do this. And it's just been a phenomenal journey, and we're very honored to be a link in Paul's journey of life. Really an honor.
The thought is to get at this thing started as simply as possible. So I was going to go out and perform as a soloist. And it was my daughter Nicole that said, why don't you write the melodies down, I'll travel with you and we'll perform together as a duo. And so before the very first performance ever took place, we teamed up and I took Nicole up on the deal. We went out and began to work as a duo, just the two of us. The whole first couple of years went that way.
I got started from the beginning with my dad to just try something new, to do something, because I wasn't really doing anything. And just really wanted to support him in his purpose of needing to express himself, telling the story of our family.
Starting from nothing, Brule worked the underground music circuit, slowly gaining momentum and a solid fan base. Nicole began to carve out her own sound and style and became the group's lead instrumentalist. Guitar and the traditional drum were added to the mix, and Paul's son Shane joined the family business after completing college and became the band's lead guitarist.
We always had the family at the core, Nicole, Shane, and myself, along with Kathy, who's always managed everything that we've done, provided the core of the Brule group. We've had many great other artists and musicians who have helped us out over the years, and the family has certainly been the core of the operation.
Joining the family trio are friends Moses Brings Plenty of the Oglala Sioux tribe on traditional drum, Clay Bryan from the Rosebud Sioux tribe on traditional drum, and special guests David Moore, also from Rosebud on traditional drum, Kurt Olson from Minneapolis on the drum kit, and vocalist Christy Belt, rounding out Arrow, the American Indian rock opera, an extension of the Brule name. The band has become one of the hardest working musical groups touring today. They maintain a schedule of well over 100 performances a year, including full stage productions with traditional dancers and an annual holiday tour. Awards and recognition have been numerous for the band, including Native American Music Awards for Group of the Year in 2002, 2006, and 2007, and Best Instrumental Recording in 2002 and 2003. The concerts for reconciliation of the cultures at Mount Rushmore are the next big step for this unique band and their story, but the road hasn't always been easy.
Thinking about how the concert for reconciliation really got its start, I would have to say that the idea was there at first. Kathy and I made our very first trip up to Mount Rushmore. I believe it would have been in the spring '97. And we went up there to introduce ourselves. To say it was a warm reception would be exaggerating a bit. But nevertheless, we made our first introductions. We met the people up there, and we began to put the idea out of a Native American musical group performing at Mount Rushmore. But as fate would have it, we were asked to perform at Mount Rushmore shortly after that first meeting. And we were invited to be part of, at that time, the live broadcast for Regis and Kathy Lee. And we were to be the musical group on the show for that live broadcast from Mount Rushmore. Well, it went very well. It went so well that the park superintendent at that time invited us to come back. We became regular performers at Mount Rushmore over the 4th of July for many years. And so it was a slow, gradual process of Brule, this little Native American group, beginning a friendship with all the people, the superintendents and supervisors and staff at Mount Rushmore. And it culminated as time went by with meeting the new park superintendent, Mr. Gerard Baker. But we began to feel like we knew each other and there was a trust factor there. And when the idea was finally presented for this large musical event that had a mission behind it, we began to all work on it, just a little at a time.
We're here at Mount Rushmore. This is an event that we have worked on for, I think, 7 years. And I'm here with my good friend, Russ Jobman, who is working with Xanterra, one of the first gentlemen that we met when we first came here and has been very kind to us over the years. It brings us to this event that is before us here for the next couple of days, Russ. And this is something that I think that you and I have talked about from the very beginning. It was a dream, I think, at one point. And as the years went by, a lot has changed. We've had a lot of support. I think I would say that we wouldn't even be talking about this event if it wouldn't have been for the support that we've had from Xanterra, from all of you, and from the Mount Rushmore Park Association. But we are here, and for whatever circumstances that have taken place and small miracles along the way, to me, this is a special event. And when we started talking about the idea of what does this mean to us, I was hoping to talk to you a little bit about you. I think had the perspective behind the scenes from the very beginning. And you know all along that we've dubbed this concert for reconciliation of the cultures. And in my heart, I know exactly what my mission is and what my goals are and why I'm here. And I'm wondering, Russ, if I could just ask you, if you'd share with me how you see this and from your perspective.
Well, Paul, I have watched you from your very first CD that we have carried here at Mount Rushmore the whole time since you first put it out. And I want you to know that I feel that Brule has gone out of their way, you being Brule in your group, Arrow, that you have gone out of your way to make sure that there is a reconciliation between the races. And with the advent of Gerard Baker coming on as superintendent in the national park, I think you've been able to impart your feelings onto not only Xanterra, but onto the National Park Service so that they could see the worth of what you were trying to do and could bring it in and bring it into fruition as to what you're doing now here at Mount Rushmore. It's phenomenal. There aren't many groups that would step out like you have and put your life and your career and your family on the line the way you have for that, and you need to be commended for it.
Well, thank you, Russ. As you know, we're here in the Black Hills of South Dakota. This is a significant location in itself. And when I've tried to relate this to other people outside of this area, they don't quite get the idea that we're sitting here at what I call kind of a cultural hotspot. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you exactly what I call this. I've referred to this area, not the Black Hills, but this area that encompasses the Black Hills,
Rapid City and Pine Ridge Reservation and the surrounding tribal communities. I've called this kind of the epicenter of what I still see as a clash between the barriers. Now I can travel around the country and there's border towns at many different parts around our country, but I think the intensity is much higher here. And the reason for that, I don't know. Maybe it could just be the proximity of the Black Hills, Rapid City, and Pine Ridge. But I certainly feel the tension more in this area. This is the main reason why I felt that this would be the area to come to work on the hardest. And I'll tell you honestly, Russ, that as time has gone by, I have felt that process taking place around here, but never stronger than I have here. There's with all the foreign tourists that come through, and your local and regional tourists that come through. This has been the place to work on that mission. And so I have worked hard to kind of have this be the final spot for at least delivering this message that we've held on to for so long. And I don't know how you feel about it.
It's not the final spot.
Well,
it's the beginning.
Well,
that's the beginning.
Well, thank you.
You have put into music what these four faces on the mountain represent. And I think that's what you are feeling, is you are feeling the connection with America that the Americans feel with the four faces on that mountain. And you have put it to music, and you have put it to the Lakota culture, and you are bringing that to the traveling public. And it is so overwhelming to see how the traveling public responds to you. To stand back, as I'm always at the back while you're playing, they respond in the same way they're responding to you. They respond to looking at the mountain for the first time.
But why Mount Rushmore? Since its completion in 1941, the monument has become a symbol of democracy for the United States. But at the same time, it has caused more controversy in the hills. Many view the carving of the four presidents as a slap in the face to the Lakota and their sacred hills. Even after the appointment of Gerard Baker, the first Native American superintendent of the park in 2004, the monument remains controversial among Native Americans.
Mount Rushmore is known as the Shrine of Democracy, and what it represents is the first 150 years of America. But what it represents is a lot more than that. Mount Rushmore, for a long time, talked about American history only, and is an event of these four presidents. Washington being number one president, of course, the first president of our nation. Jefferson being known to buy the Louisiana Purchase from Napoleon and send Lewis and Clark across the country. And also we have Theodore Roosevelt, who is the father of our conservation movement in developing the national park systems. We also have Abraham Lincoln, who was known for freeing the slaves as they worked with the Civil War. Now, one thing that we don't talk about, we are talking about now, is the fact that before this was a national park area, this was homeland to the Lakota. It was a homeland because they came out of here at the Black Hills and they were removed by the United States government. And so we need to tell both sides of that story. Not to blame one another, but to have an understanding that will never happen again. The understanding is that all people are created equal. That's what we say as American people. Especially as American Indians, we know that we belong to this land. This land has spirits that we still utilize to this day, and we always will utilize. And so at Mount Rushmore, we're telling many stories. We're telling both sides of the story. One side is a bittersweet story, and as I tell people, some of our stories are really hard to tell, and some of our stories are really hard to listen to, but we need to tell them. Because again, it's the growth of a nation. Sometimes the growth of a nation impacts a certain civilization, which it did. But in this day and age, we all realize that we are truly free. In fact, right now, we are fighting a war on terrorism, and I use that quite a bit because as we fight the war on terrorism, we're fighting it together. We're fighting it side by side. We don't care who's next to us. We don't care if the person next to us is white, black, brown, yellow, or red. What we care about is they know what they're doing. What we care about is we know how to trust them and they trust us. And that's the way America should be. And I think that's the way we're headed. So as we do tell the story about Mount Rushmore, we tell it many different ways. We tell it with music. We tell it with lecture. We tell it with dance. And we tell it with other cultures. And so with this in mind, we want to welcome people to Mount Rushmore in the hopes that they'll understand the entire story, from the story of the Lakota living here and other tribes utilizing this beautiful place we call the sacred Black Hills of the Pahasapa. We also tell the story of the Western movement, and we tell the story of future and hope for the future generations to come.
Mount Rushmore is a controversial place. That's right, it is a controversial place. But not from white America, and not controversial from the point of view from corporate America, or from America, period. It's a controversial place to those that really care and stand true to a traditional way of life, to an old way of life. So it's controversial only to the American Indian people. Anything outside of that, anyone else outside of that, it's not controversial. Do I like Mount Rushmore? No. Those are 4 terrorist faces that are up there, as far as we're concerned. And if anyone really knows who they are, they will understand where they come from. And understanding where they come from, they're going to realize of how much pain and how many lives have been lost because of 4 faces. It is honestly one of the largest disgraces to us as the American Indian people.
The monument, I think it means more to non-Indians than it means to Indians. Sometimes I feel a little anger because the very faces that we come here and we're seeing are those faces who wanted to annihilate us, eliminate us from the face of the earth, and yet they're our draw. And I think that's quite sad. Perhaps someday the Crazy Horse monument will be finished, but we'll have our spot too. I think there's a lot of irony to having it here that just might do a lot of good.
I think the Black Hills, as a whole, is a very good place. Is fascinating.
We're here at Mount Rushmore, and there's a lot of feelings about this place. To me, it's a violation to our sacred homeland desecration. But I believe that through music and through our traditional value system, that in our knowledge, with our understanding of our earth, the natural way of things, and the spiritual understanding of the things that connect us to the natural world and this earth that we inhabit together, that we can heal a shattered consciousness.
What do you think about location? You think Mount Rushmore is the right place for this?
Well, favorite people of all time, Thomas Jefferson is right up here, so
Awesome.
Absolutely couldn't be in a more beautiful setting. And for reconciliation, I mean, I know Paul has been wanting to do this for a long, long time, so I'm so happy that the parks finally opened this up and it can begin.
I think it's the right place for the concert. And the reason why I think it's the right place for the concert is because here we stand under 4 heads of presidents, but we make an appearance as natives, stating that we are still here. We are still here to make a stand in our culture and to educate people from around the world. And I think that's truly important. I think it is the proper place to be. Everything's meant for a reason if this has a reason.